scratch. But lately, our sources are showing a real migration happening. We're seeing developers, both on their own and in teams, actively moving away from Next.js, and they're moving toward a much newer player.
TanStack Start.
TanStack Start. And it's more than just, framework fatigue. It feels like a strategic choice.
It is. So our mission in this deep dive is to really understand what's driving this shift. TanStack Start comes from the same team that, let's be honest, completely changed data handling with TanStack Query.
Right.
So we need to figure out why this new framework is getting so much love, what it really offers, and what this all tells us about what developers actually want right now.
And the initial thesis, which you see everywhere, Reddit, engineering blogs, it's key. This is not a revolt against a broken tool. Next.js still works, and it works brilliantly for a lot of people.
For sure.
But developers keep saying that TanStack Start just feels lighter. It feels more transparent and, critically, closer to plain React.
It feels like getting control back. The word I hear over and over is sanity.
Sanity, yeah. It's like a collective desire to just dial back the complexity that's been building up over the last few years.
100%.
So let's start there, with that complexity, because it's a huge paradox with Next.js, right? It began as this framework of simplicity, of removing boilerplate. But now so many developers describe it as like battling a constantly shifting labyrinth. Where did that feeling of losing control really start?
I think it started when the framework began chasing, maximum performance in these heavy abstractions. Developers really pointed two big inflection points. The first one was the introduction of the App Router.
Okay.
Which just fundamentally changed the routing and the file system rules that everyone had known and relied on for years.
And that wasn't just about changing where you put your files, was it? It was deeper than that.
Oh, way deeper.
Yeah.
It forced developers to grapple with the second, and I'd say more profound, shift: React Server Components, RSCs.
Ah, yes. The source of much debate.
A huge source. The concept is incredibly powerful, running UI logic on the server. But the implementation meant developers suddenly had to categorize every single component. Is this use client? Is this use server?
And that sounds like it introduces all sorts of subtle bugs.
It did. And they were incredibly difficult to trace. So instead of focusing on their app's logic, people were spending hours just debugging component boundaries. It's exhausting.
It is exhausting. You're having to learn this whole new mental model for state and data, and the rules of the road just kept changing every few months.
Developer fatigue is a real thing. We found this quote that just nails the sentiment. Developer said, Next.js lost me with the constant changes and complexity. The benefits don't justify the cognitive overload. I feel like I'm constantly debugging the framework, not my code.
Wow. And if you're a CTO, that phrase cognitive overload just translates directly to, well, money. Slower velocity, more debugging hours.
Exactly. Predictability just goes out the window. And that's tied to another factor, a non-technical one that's become impossible to ignore.
Platform dependency.
The Vercel relationship.
The very tight relationship between Next.js and Vercel, the company behind it.
Correct. As Next.js evolved, so many of its best features like zero config deploys, edge middleware, caching, they became so tightly integrated with Vercel's platform.
So developers felt like the framework was pushing them toward a single hosting provider.
It's that feeling of vendor lock-in. People love how easy Vercel is to use, but they hate feeling like the framework's roadmap is prioritizing Vercel's business over their own freedom.
Yeah, their freedom to deploy wherever they want.
And one developer was so blunt about it, they said, it's tough to separate Next.js from Vercel. Most advantages people list are actually Vercel features.
That's a powerful point. If your framework's best selling point is a proprietary hosting platform, you're kind of stuck.
Developers want portability. They're pushing back against being strategically corralled.
And that search for portability, for simplicity, and for trust, really, that leads us right to TanStack. This isn't some new kid on the block. They have a massive foundation of credibility.
Immense credibility. The name TanStack carries so much weight because of what they did with TanStack Query. You'll remember it as a React query.
Of course.
Before Query, handling server data in a big React app was it was a nightmare. You're setting up these huge Redux stores, writing custom caching logic. It was just a mess.
A huge source of anxiety for any large team, for sure.
And TanStack Query just walked in and solved it with almost shocking simplicity. It just worked. Fetching, caching, error handling, all based on hooks. It just made sense. It wiped out entire categories of boilerplate code.
So the community already trusts this team. They've seen them solve a really gnarly, fundamental problem without resorting to confusing magic. The philosophy is What? Simplicity without secrecy.
That's a great way to put it. And that trust is transferable. So when that same team launches a full-stack framework, people assume it's going to have that same clean, transparent logic.
There's a built-in expectation of quality.
There is. And the developer quote really captures it. They did for routing and server logic what they already did for state management. Made it simple, predictable, and type-safe. The trust is already baked in.
Okay, so let's dig into the mechanics. What is TanStack Start, really? What's under the hood that lets it achieve this feeling of lightness and transparency?
Well, it's built on a foundation of really popular open source standards. At its core, it's a full-stack React framework built around TanStack Router. That's its backbone. But crucially, it uses Vite for its build system.
And Vite is known for being blazing fast. That's a huge DX win right there.
It is huge. And to solve that vendor lock-in problem we were just talking about, TanStack Start leverages this multi-runtime deployment engine called Nitro.
Nitro. Okay, so what does that do?
Nitro is the key to portability. It's an abstraction layer. It means the framework can compile and deploy to Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare, a standard node server, basically anywhere, all with the same code base.
So that just immediately solves the platform dependency issue. You choose your host based on features or cost, not because your framework is forcing you to.
Exactly. Now let's talk features, because they directly attack those problems of complexity and unpredictability. The first monster feature is type-safe routing.
And this isn't just about having nice names for your routes. It's about confidence at compile time, right?
Yes, total compiler confidence. In a traditional app, if you change a URL parameter, say from users.id to users.userid,
your code breaks, but you don't find out until a user hits that page in production. A runtime error.
the worst kind of error. With type-safe routing, if you make that change, your TypeScript compiler fails immediately.
Yeah.
In your code editor, before you even commit.
You know right away.
You know right away. It prevents an entire class of really painful bugs. That's a level of confidence that other major frameworks just haven't quite delivered on yet.
I can see how that alone would slash debugging hours.
It absolutely does. And the second big benefit tackles the server logic complexity. Server functions.
Okay.
So instead of that whole use client sys server mental gymnastics from RSCs, TanStack Start lets you write isolated backend logic-like fetching from a database, and then you can just call those functions safely from your client code.
So you get that full stack benefit of co-locating your logic, but without the cognitive overhead of a super opinionated server component model.
It keeps a clear separation of concerns, but it simplifies how you call back and forth. And then for rendering, it uses what most developers find is the most practical approach, client-first rendering.
Explain that.
It uses server-side rendering, SSR, for the initial page load. So you get great performance, great SEO. But as soon as that page hydrates, every click after that behaves like a super fast single-page app.
Pass to both worlds. Initial speed, and then smooth, snappy navigation inside the app.
And you avoid all the weird refetching and full-page re-rendering that can sometimes plague those heavier server-centric frameworks. It really prioritizes the user's experience.
This all comes back to that core theme we keep hearing. Less magic, more control.
With Next.js, people often talk about these implicit conventions, things happening behind the scenes they don't fully understand. And TanStack Start is the complete antithesis of that.
Yeah.
Every step, data loading where code runs, rendering, it's all explicit. You, the developer, know exactly what's happening and where.
Which has to make it so much easier to maintain. When a bug shows up, you aren't wondering if the framework's magic is the problem. You just look at your code.
The rules are clear.
Yeah.
And the experience of building with it. Developers just report a huge increase in their coding velocity. The type-safe routing, the predictable data fetching. It all adds up to a really smooth developer experience.
It feels closer to pure React. That's got to be the highest compliment you can give a framework.
It is. And you mentioned that quote earlier. When I first tried it, I thought I was missing something because it was so easy. It just worked.
Yeah.
That feeling of things just clicking into place without having to fight your tools is it's a rare win in this industry.
And we're not just talking about little toy projects. We're seeing real-world complex migrations.
Absolutely. Think about that real-time quiz app someone built. They were having these persistent hydration issues with their old setup, and they said just moving to TanStack Start fixed them immediately. That's real problem solving.
What about integrating with other backends? Like if your API isn't built in the JavaScript ecosystem?
Great question. We saw a perfect example of a multi-language analytics dashboard. The backend was Laravel, a PHP framework, and the front end was TanStack Start. The devs specifically called out how easy it was to set up SSR for this really complex app. That shows serious flexibility.
Okay, so we have to be fair here. If TanStack Start is so great at simplicity and transparency, what is Next.js still doing better? Or maybe where is TanStack Start less mature?
That's the crucial trade-off. Next.js, just because of its maturity and the huge investment from Vercel, it still has an edge in very specialized areas. Things like advanced image optimization or really sophisticated built-in middleware. That stuff is just more mature in Next.js.
So if you need that absolute cutting-edge, platform-specific functionality, Next.js still has a more out-of-the-box solution.
Precisely, albeit at the cost of that portability. TanStack Start gets its portability from universal tools like Nitro. But if you need, say, hyper-specific caching that relies on Vercel's proprietary edge network, Next.js is more tightly integrated.
But the key distinction is that for most apps,
For the vast majority of applications, yeah, the 90% that just need solid routing, data fetching, and a great developer experience, TanStack Start provides a much less restrictive environment.
so if we step back and look at the broader trend here, it really feels like we've hit a point where developers are choosing clarity and control over, relentless abstraction.
That is the big takeaway. For years, the trend was to chase magic, to believe that hiding complexity was the path forward. But when that magic broke, it became the enemy. TanStack Start shows the pendulum is swinging back.
Back towards type safety, transparency, explicit control.
Back to first principles. It shows that simplicity and maintainability aren't just luxuries. They're core requirements for any sustainable project.
And that core appeal is so clear in what people are saying. TanStack brings back sanity. It's a framework that 99% of devs actually want to use.
It's powerful and it's modern, but it respects the developer's time and their intelligence.
So as this framework gains more and more traction, really pushing this idea of multi-platform flexibility or rejecting vendor lock-in, it forces a really interesting strategic question onto the whole ecosystem.
It really does. If the default frameworks developers are choosing are designed from the ground up to be platform agnostic, built on universal tools like Vite and Nitro, you have to start looking at the business models of these big hosting platforms.
Right. If developers can easily deploy to Netlify or Cloudflare or Vercel with minimal effort, and the framework isn't tied to any single platform's quirks, what happens to the competitive advantage of the company that championed the old standard?
It forces those platforms to compete purely on their hosting features, on their reliability, on their price, instead of leveraging framework dependence to capture the market. And that shift, driven by developers choosing transparency, well, that's the real story here.